Welcome to Perfectionists Anonymous, a podcast-style channel dedicated to unraveling the myth of perfectionist living. I'm your host, Caitlin, and I'm a recovering perfectionist. I invite you to sit down, relax, and hang out with me, your supportive friend, who knows how difficult perfectionism can be and who wants to find a better way. Thank you for joining me today. I've always envied people who sleep easily. Their brains must be cleaner, the floorboards of the skull well swept, all the little monsters closed up in a steamer trunk at the foot of the bed. David Benioff, City of Thieves. Greetings, fellow perfectionists. I hope you're all doing well. Today's episode will be covering an issue near and dear to my heart, one that probably is familiar to many of you as well: insomnia. And if you don't necessarily connect with the full-on diagnosis of insomnia, it's at least entirely possible that your sleep may be fractured or quote-unquote imperfect. This episode is all about exploring the complicated world of sleep and how perfectionistic ideals may be getting in the way of peacefully counting sheep. I can remember the last time that I slept entirely throughout the night without waking up. I was 18 and I am now 28. It has been almost a decade since I have had one of those sleeps where your head hits the pillow, your eyes close, you take a few deep breaths, and the next thing you know, you're naturally waking up feeling rested and whole. At that time, I had decided to transfer from the first university that I attended, after one agonizing semester, to a different school. For a variety of reasons, those 4 months were the most difficult of my life, and I had just landed in Utah at my aunt and uncle's home for Christmas vacation with my whole family. The amount of relief I felt at leaving a situation that had brought me so much unhappiness was indescribable, and I genuinely think that I was so emotionally exhausted and felt so free at that time that I felt like things could only get better from there. And so I slept beautifully. But that was a decade ago. Shucks. And seriously, gosh darn it, I really suck at sleep and I haven't slept well since that day. And it really bothers me. I am an incredibly light sleeper. I am awoken by the slightest noise, the slightest move, or the slightest change in my surroundings. I sometimes have nights where I never fully fall asleep, but instead hang in some sort of weird limbo where I am dozing and yet still hearing and experiencing everything around me. I wake up multiple times throughout the night, and I take an inordinate amount of time to fall back asleep. I regularly have nightmares. I toss and turn all night and struggle to maintain a comfortable position. Because of all of this, I need approximately 10 hours of sleep to feel rested. And because I work a full-time job as a speech-language pathologist in an elementary school setting, I never get 10 hours of sleep. So I am constantly sleep-deprived. I can't even imagine yet what it's like for you parents who are listening. Long story short, sleep has always fascinated me, perhaps because I'm so bad at it and I wish I could find a better way. That's me chasing after a perfectionist fantasy, of course. Nobody sleeps perfectly every single night, but there are a lot of people who manage to sleep well regularly. But is it possible that my perfectionism is getting in the way of my sleep? And perhaps in the way of yours too? I think it's a distinct possibility. I did some preliminary research on this topic because I was curious if this was something that the psychological world was examining. I was actually able to find quite a few studies, which I will link in the description down below. Among them were these findings. Among undergraduate students, high levels of perfectionistic concerns were associated with poorer sleep quality because of higher levels of stress. In another study, students who reported insomnia at baseline had significantly higher scores of socially prescribed perfectionism on a perfectionism measurement scale. A second study confirmed this and noted that it was true for both male and female participants with no significant gender differences. An additional study found that 3 dimensions of perfectionism were significantly related to insomnia severity: high concern over mistakes, high doubts about action, and low levels of organization led to increased levels of insomnia. A final study concluded that perfectionism was directly associated with poor sleep, but only because factors such as high stress, reduced use of coping strategies, and reduced emotional regulation are factors commonly associated with perfectionism. To summarize, there is actually quite a bit of research examining the connection between the personality trait of perfectionism and the physical symptom of insomnia. Current research seems to suggest a significant correlation between the two, though this is primarily because sleep-impacting components, such as stress, struggles with emotions, and increased levels of worry, coexist in individuals who identify as perfectionists or who present with perfectionistic traits. And this makes a lot of sense to me. When I'm twisting and turning, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, and trying to will myself to sleep, it's the thoughts spinning in my head that are really preventing me from experiencing that blissful rest. There's the pressure that I put on myself to sleep to consider as well. Have you ever done that thing where you're laying in bed struggling to sleep, so you roll over and look at the clock and it says 12:50 a.m.? So you say to yourself, okay, if I fall asleep in 10 minutes, then I'll fall asleep at 1 a.m., which means I'll get 4 hours of sleep since I have to wake up at 5 a.m. But then that hardly feels like any sleep at all. Oh my God, I'm never going to fall asleep. And then you can't fall asleep even more because now all you can do is think about how little sleep you're getting, how you wish you had more, how sleep should be easier, ad infinitum. And beyond those self-fulfilling prophecy thoughts along the lines of, I'll never get to sleep, I also find 3 different kinds of thoughts swimming around in my brain in the wee hours of the night. These kinds of thoughts are incredibly common, especially in individuals who experience perfectionistic tendencies, high levels of anxiety, and high levels of stress. So I think they're important to mention because they're probably also showing up in your brain when you're trying to sleep. And sometimes simply naming them can help. First, racing thoughts. Racing thoughts are when your brain rushes from thought to thought, idea to idea, so quickly that it starts to feel overwhelming, like you can't possibly keep up. Your brain bounces from one worry to the next. Oh my gosh, did I turn the stove off? What did that coworker think when she complimented my shirt, but I didn't compliment her back? Should I have complimented her? What was that noise? Was it a murderer? Oh my gosh, I have so much work to do that I didn't do today. I need to respond to that email right away tomorrow. What else do I need to do tomorrow? Was that my cat? I hope she's okay. Oh, remember that one time in 3rd grade that everyone found out who you had a crush on? Boy, that sure was awkward. Yikes. Racing thoughts just keep going, and once the train starts, it's difficult to stop. Second, ruminating thoughts. Ruminating thoughts are when you get stuck on the same idea and no matter how hard you try to turn away from it or think about something else, you just keep coming back to it. For example, maybe you had an encounter at work or school that you wish had gone differently, and you just keep thinking about it. You think about all the things you should have said differently, what you imagine the person thinks about you, what you could have done differently, if you're a bad person, if they're a bad person. Ruminating thoughts are similar to racing thoughts, but they're more focused on one particular thought or idea. Lastly, intrusive thoughts. These are my least favorite because intrusive thoughts are, by nature, thoughts that are disagreeable to you for whatever reason, that pop into your head without your knowledge or consent. They happen to everybody once in a while. All of a sudden, they are just there. They may conflict with your moral values, they may seem creepy, scary, macabre, or otherwise unsettling, and most people's gut reaction is to try and get rid of the thought as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, the brain's reaction to this is usually to double down on the intrusive thought, which means that it sticks around ever more persistently. And really, it's these three kinds of thoughts, in whatever proportions, and sometimes other kinds of thoughts too, that are born out of perfectionism, anxiety, and stress, and that then impact our sleep. Because perfectionists are really freaking good at thinking an awful lot about the tiniest of things, the smallest of problems, the most minuscule of details. We hyper-focus on how people perceive us, the work we need to do, how well we're doing the work we need to do. We hyperfixate on all the mistakes we think we've made, on all our imperfections, and on all the things that happened in the past that, if they were just different, might mean that we'd be in a better place now. We're really good at that, letting all those thoughts wake us in the middle of the night, keep us from falling asleep, and stop us from actually enjoying the rest. Perfectionism strikes again. It pretends like it's helping us when really it's denying us one of the greatest and most simple joys of life, a good night's sleep. So, is there anything we can do about it? There are plenty of options out there marketed to help people sleep. Changing your sheets, changing your pillows, trying medications, trying supplements, trying eye masks, trying fancy pajamas, using fancy alarm clocks, meditation and sleep apps, medical devices, weighted blankets, temperature control devices, sound machines, teas, and more. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I've tried every single one of these to varying degrees of success. When exploring medications, supplements, or anything you may ingest to aid in sleep, it is always best to check with your doctor first. For that reason, I won't be discussing any of those options here. Another reason I won't be discussing those options is because they don't target the root of perfectionism attacking sleep. They target the symptoms, but so do weighted blankets, comfy pillows, and fancy eye masks. And I'm not at all saying that those things might not be helpful. Medication is a completely valid and important part of many people's lives when they go through the proper channels of working with their doctor to find a match for them. Similarly, I use a sound machine to aid in my sleep every night. I sleep with linen sheets to help aid in temperature control so that I experience less discomfort, and I use a weighted blanket to help my body feel more at rest. All of these things help me, but like I mentioned, I still don't sleep through the night. I still suck at sleeping, even with the benefits that all these things provide and that other people might swear by. And that's because my real issue is my thoughts. Two strategies that help me the most are sleep meditations and progressive muscle relaxation, because they both do the same thing. They force my brain to focus on something besides my racing, ruminating, or intrusive thoughts, and towards my breathing and my body. This episode is not sponsored, but I personally use the Calm app to access guided sleep meditations that help me focus on deep breathing, slowing down, and relaxing. This certainly isn't the only place where you can find these kinds of meditations, it just happens to be the one that I enjoy the most. Similarly, progressive muscle relaxation is a practice where you connect tensing different muscle groups to your deep inhales and exhales. I usually start at my feet, tensing them as tightly as I can, breathing in as slowly and deliberately as I can, and then relaxing my feet as I breathe out just as slowly and deliberately. You then move progressively up the body, following the same pattern, to your legs, hips, and glutes, abdomen, chest and shoulders, arms, hands, neck, and face. Of course, this works especially well when you are already in bed and as comfy as possible. And there are so many other things that are purported to help. establishing a consistent nighttime routine, avoiding caffeine and alcohol too close to bedtime, avoiding screens before bedtime, removing distractions from your immediate vicinity, using your bed only for sleep and not for work, etc. And again, all of these might be helpful. I've tried all of these too. But the most important thing, I think, is addressing the root, those perfectionistic thoughts that keep interrupting your attempts at sleep. Meditations and progressive muscle relaxation can help with this, and so can other mitigation strategies that you do during the day. Perhaps even listening to this podcast is one way that you're practicing letting go of some of those perfectionistic thoughts, which in turn may reduce how many of those thoughts find their way into your brain at night. But nothing is perfect. We'll never sleep perfectly every night. We'll never craft the perfect nighttime routine. We'll never feel perfectly rested every morning. And that's okay. Like everything else, it's a process. And it's often more important to know why things are happening instead of focusing on how we can action our ways out of them. Putting additional pressure on ourselves to sleep better just adds more stress and perfectionistic ideals. But addressing the why, step by step, over time, is what leads to results. Addressing the perfectionistic thoughts is what may, at least in part, lead to more fulfilling sleep. I started today's episode with a quote attributed to David Benioff from City of Thieves. "I've always envied people who sleep easily. Their brains must be cleaner, the floorboards of the skull well swept, all the little monsters closed up in a steamer trunk at the foot of the bed." If we can clean up the dust that is perfectionism clouding our brains, perhaps sleeping more easily may be on the horizon. Perfectionistic thoughts are like little monsters under the bed. When they can rest, then so can we. Thank you for listening today, fellow perfectionists. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more perfectionism-related content and to help the channel grow. If these episodes are resonating with you and you think they might resonate with others, please feel free to share it as well. Until next time, fellow perfectionists.